Bonsoir, plutôt bon après-midi. Alors, bon, on va reprendre la deuxième partie de ce débat. Ça sera plutôt en anglais. Moi-même, je vais parler en anglais, car la plupart des participants dans les débats sont anglophones, même si Elsa Dorlin, qui est ici à ma droite, va parler en français. Donc, en tout cas, peut-être que vous avez besoin des headphones pour la traduction.
Moi, je voulais dire une chose aussi.
OK.
C'est que quand on a commencé à travailler sur le sujet et surtout sur le contenu de ce moment qu'on passe ensemble, on a eu beaucoup de discussions avec Paul. Et Paul, il a dit qu'il faut des artistes et il faut des critical thinkers. Et c'est pour ça qu'on a eu beaucoup de chance, parce que tout ça se crée entre philosophes, sociologues, économistes, politiciens, politologues, mais surtout les artistes et les critical thinkers vont nous amener vers quelque chose d'autre. Donc merci que vous êtes là, Elsa, Sandi, Anjalika et Paul.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. It is a real pleasure for me to be here. I like to thank everyone that has made this debate possible. First of all, Maya Hoffman, that is here, but I will not demand anyone to clap and do the whole ritual again, because I think that by now we could clap each other, the whole evening. So I also like to thank Hans Ulrich for the conversation that led us to be here together today. And of course, Maria Finders and Florence May, who's there, always busy working on different things, but without whom all this wouldn't be possible. Okay. Maybe this is going to be a second panel, but maybe it's going to be a turnaround of things. Maybe because you already see what is coming. Okay, this is the female warriors with the transgender warrior here together. So we are like the second front coming to fight for a different kind of hospitality, very much relying on what has been said, but maybe shifting the terms a little bit as well. So ladies and gentlemen, but especially those who are here and maybe are not, neither ladies nor gentlemen, welcome to the second panel. I would like to say a few words about hospitality before introducing the people that have come with me to the panel today. As has been said, my name is Paul B. Preciado, and I'm a writer in residency at the LUMA Foundation here in Arles, and I have been here in the city for the last 4 months. And I love the city. I have to say that I was here during the winter time when no one was here, and I totally adore the city, and this has become for me like a utopia for writing. So I'm super happy and delighted and thankful to the LUMA Foundation and to Maya Hoffman, who has made this possible. And what is funny is that of course, I have been a guest. I'm a guest in this house at the LUMA Foundation. But something happened with these discussions with Maria, with Tony Guerrero, with Maya, with Hans Ulrich. Something happened that I went from being a guest and I became a host. So that I had suddenly, in the position of being a guest, I had the chance of inviting other people to come here with me. And then I thought, oh, how funny. I was supposed to be a guest and now I'm inviting people myself. And this is one of the things that I think we could speak about today and that I like to reflect today with you about, which is this complex relationship between being a ghost and being a guest, becoming a host, becoming a guest, or rejecting both positions, the position of the host and the position of the guest. So what does it mean to host today? And what does it mean to be a guest? The question of hospitality is, of course, reactivated today within the global context of economic and ecological violence, a context of military war, and a context of neoliberal capitalism. As Achille Mbembe has noticed, we are the first generation of humans to inhabit just one world, the same world. This has never happened to anyone before us, like so clearly. We live suddenly all in the same world, in just one world. This is exactly what Glissant was also calling one world in relation. But we inhabit this world in a paradoxical condition of extreme mobility of goods within the market and extreme restriction of the conditions of mobility for human beings. And not for all of us. Some of us, maybe not all of us, have or have not the chance of this mobility. In a certain sense, we're still under the shadow of the Code Noir. I guess that most of you that are here are French. Nevertheless, probably most of you do not know what is the Code Noir. And I think that this speaks very much about something that we would like to bring together to this panel, our own history. What are we going to do with our own history? How can we critically reappropriate the history that is ours, that is our common history? So the Code Noir was the French economic treatise that legalized slavery in 1685. It was written under Louis XIV and gave the right to buy and sell human beings as living machines to be put to work at the plantation. So the notions of labor and mobility that we are still using today are very much connected and inscribed within this colonial framework. So we need to decolonize these notions of labor, mobility, but also of hospitality. And I think that the three panelists today that are here with me will speak precisely about what does it mean to decolonize these notions. We speak about hospitality mostly, and has happened already in the first panel, in relation to what has been called and already criticized by Ali, the crisis of the refugees. But we are really speaking about the crisis of Western notions of national sovereignty, cultural identity, but also a crisis and profound transformation of the technologies of production of subjectivity. And this is one of the issues that I like to bring as well to the panel, because we all constantly speaking about the framework of the nation state, we're constantly speaking about the frontiers, but what about the technologies of production of subjectivity? What is happening with subjectivity and the way it's being produced and reproduced? So we are living now a new shift with the advent of nuclear energy, of new military technologies, internet, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, new reproductive technologies, biotechnologies, genetic technologies, ecological destruction. We are in what we could call, with Thomas Kuhn, a shift of paradigm that is only comparable to the one happening in the 15th century, with colonization, with the expansion of capitalism, and with the invention of the printing press. We're in a moment that is so radically important as it was the 15th century. And this is why many of the notions that we were using before are not valid anymore. They seem obsolete. We're carrying these notions with us, but we don't know if we can do something with them now in this new epistemological and political framework. And this is one of the questions that I like to pose to this panel. If precisely the notion of hospitality belongs to this humanist Western colonial framework or not, or if it can be used and taken with us to this new paradigm in which we are moving, and how we will have to transform this notion, what we will have to do with this notion for this notion to be able to create and to embody a full different politics. What is clear, and I think that all of us being in the panel today, we come from a long series of revolutions. I like to strongly say today that we are in a revolutionary time, and that the only problem that we have is that you do not know it. We are going through the major revolution that we could imagine, but you're just sleeping. And this is amazing, it's extraordinary. One day people will say, this was the biggest revolution, but you didn't know. So it's a question of consciousness. It's a question of becoming conscious, of cognitive awareness, of knowing what is the revolution that we are going through. Clearly, for some of us, we are in a revolution. We are going in a kind of ongoing struggle. From the 1950s, with the Bandung Conference, in a kind of a global and macro-political scale, we started a process of decolonization. And this is moving on and moving ahead. At the same time, very soon, in the 60s, the feminist movement, the gay and lesbian movement, but also the rebel against the prison complex, against the psychiatric institutions, the institutional critique against the ways in which dominant narratives are constructed through representation in the school, in the museum, the critique of institutional discipline, of disciplinary institutions. All this has been happening and is still happening. This is a long micro-political revolution. So it's not a revolution that will take place from one day to the next. This is an ongoing revolution that we are into. It is clear at the same time that we are also living a moment of counter-revolution. I mean, I guess that this is what you are obviously feeling, and that's why we are almost like super depressed. Being depressed, a condition of this counter-revolution. We are in a moment of techno-patriarchal, neo-colonial reform. This is also what is happening. And many of the things that we will be speaking about today here, they speak about the struggle between this long process of political emancipation and this counter-revolution that is happening now at the same time. So we need new grammars to fight against the new organization of power. The question is if hospitality can be part of this new ethical, aesthetic, or political grammar. Today, with the three guests that are here with me, I like to look at the notion of hospitality from a trans-feminist, anti-colonial perspective. I thought that all the participants before would have done it, but indeed they finally didn't do it. So I like to do it with you briefly. I like to pay attention to the etymology of hospitality. As you probably know, hospitality comes from the Latin hospes, which comes as well from the Greek xenosune. Xeno, you hear the word, the root, foreign, like in xenophobic, for instance. Well, this word was translated hospes in Latin, being very close to the word hostis. The hospes is the one who hosts, the host, the one who welcomes. The hostis is supposed to be the stranger, the foreigner, but also the enemy. This is the very close friction that you can still hear in the connection between the word hospitality and hostility, okay? So the question of being foreign and how to deal with what is foreign is at the core of this notion. The second question that is at the core of the notion of hospitality is the issue of home, of building a home, of being at home, but also of who is the owner of the home and who has the right to host. And this is a key question that many of the participants of the panel today will address. And I like to warn you against what I'm going to define following Foucault and Achille Mbembe as a possible necropolitical definition of the notion of hospitality. Well, the problem of this notion of hospitality is that historically, the one that has the right to host is also the sovereign, is also the owner of the house, is also the father and the husband. So this notion of hospitality, at least in the West, is patriarchal. And this means that this form of hospitality is defined in necropolitical terms. What does it mean, necropolitical terms? It means that the power of the sovereign, the power of the father and husband, is defined by his right to kill. His right to kill the wife, the children, the animals, the servants, having the right of life and death over the people, right? So this necropolitical definition, both of the home, of sovereignty, and of hospitality, bring us precisely to the hostility of hospitality. One of the questions that I like to ask to the panel, and I asked before to the three panelists today, because we had many discussions before, is precisely what are the technologies of violence that come together with hospitality. And maybe this notion has to be transformed, has to be fully criticized, and has to be changed in a sense. So Derrida spoke about the differences between conditional hospitality, a hospitality, he said, that had rules, laws, rights, that it was imposing conditions on the one that is welcome, on the guest. And he also spoke about unconditional hospitality. I would say now, from a trans-feminist, anti-colonial reading of hospitality, that this conditional hospitality is really necropolitical hospitality, right? It comes with a lot of violence. And therefore, maybe this notion needs to be depatriarchalized, decolonialized, before we can fully use it to create society or create community. I'd like to address a second question briefly, because I know that time is passing, but hospitality is granted apparently to the foreigner. But the question is, who is the foreigner? And I think that this question has also been addressed and discussed before by the panel, especially by Ali and Mantia. Who is the foreigner? And who is kept forever in the condition of being a guest? And I'd like to take now my own personal and political experience. I'm a transgender writer and activist, which means that I was assigned female gender when I was born, and I decided intentionally to modify this gender assignation and change my name legally and transform my body and my subjectivity. But to be transgender within this society, not in a faraway society, no, within this European, Western, democratic, humanist society, means to be foreign in your own home, means to be foreign in your own country, even means to be foreign in your own body. So I'm always put in the position of asking the state, and in brackets, I have to say that the state is now the one that is granting hospitality. From the 19th century is not anymore the father or the husband, but the state that took the mission of granting hospitality. So I'm constantly put in the position of asking the state to grant me hospitality, to welcome me within society. But this welcoming, this hosting, implies to be also the object of a lot of institutional violence, a lot of hostility, the violence of normalization and integration. So I'm granted conditional necropolitical hospitality, thank you so much, the state, to be able to change my gender, I have to, for instance, to prove that I'm mentally ill, to accept a medical and psychiatric diagnosis, and to accept that I will reproduce normality, gender normality, and sexual normality, meaning that I would be heterosexual, male-looking, and so on, which I think I'll do pretty well. I mean, you can assess, but I'm trying my best. I have other secret ways of not following the rule. But what is interesting for me is that I am put in the position of be the eternal guest, the one that will be the guest forever. So forever asking for hospitality. And I think that this is the form of the political trap of humanist democratic societies. And therefore, this is one of the reasons why I'm asking the panelists that are here with me today to help me to maybe dismantle this notion of hospitality and bring us towards new grammars. And it is now my great pleasure to introduce you to first Elsa Dorlin. Is a professor of philosophy, someone that I know for a really long time and that we have been in many battles. He's someone that has been very meaningful and important in feminist and black feminist struggles in France. She's written several books on gender, sex, and race. And recently, she has published an amazing essay, one of the best that I've written. Has been written recently for me, and the best that I read recently, which is called "Se défendre une philosophie de la violence." So I welcome Elsa Dorlin. Thank you.
Merci infiniment, merci Paul, et merci pour cette invitation, ce lieu et toutes les personnes qui ont rendu cet événement possible, et merci aux traductrices. Je vais commencer par une histoire. Donc c'était une magnifique journée de septembre en 2016, et j'étais sur la Côte d'Azur, et c'était une magnifique journée avec une lumière fascinante, un ciel immense, la mer en miroir. Et j'étais dans le train, dans une ligne de chemin de fer qui relie l'Italie à Marseille. Et le train, effectivement, sur cette ligne, est comme suspendu au-dessus de l'eau. Le train frise la roche végétalisée, fleurie. Il y a des villas de milliardaires sur lesquelles, en fait, on a une vue surplombante, ce qui est très agréable. Et on entrevoit les centres historiques des petites villes, parfois des demeures isolées avec des jardins d'un autre temps et qui semblent abandonnés comme ça. Et en quittant une petite ville à côté de Nice qui s'appelle Beaulieu-sur-Mer, en cette fin d'après-midi, j'étais avec mes 2 enfants et nous rentrions de la plage où nous avions passé quelques heures. Le train est un train de banlieue, en fait, mais qui relie la France à l'Italie en moins d'1 heure. Et ce n'est plus à ce moment-là le plein été, donc le train n'est pas bondé, il y a quasiment plus de touristes. Il y a des gens du pays, des travailleurs, des familles, des jeunes en groupe de 2 ou 3, et plutôt des personnes qui circulent comme ça de façon quotidienne. Et je faisais partie de ces derniers. Et je veux montrer à mes enfants en fait que la beauté de ces paysages, etc. Et puis l'un d'eux dans le train a besoin d'aller aux toilettes. Et en fait, depuis quelques mois, je m'aperçois que sur cette ligne, les toilettes sont souvent fermées dans les trains. Parfois, une seule cabine est laissée à disposition des usagers. Nous arpentons le train finalement avec ma fille et nous sommes en habit d'été, nous avons encore du sable collé sur les pieds, on a les bouées, etc. Et puis, je devance mon enfant pour vérifier, je trouve une toilette et je devance mon enfant pour vérifier la propreté du lieu. Et quand je rentre dans cet espace exigu, mon geste est d'emblée arrêté. Derrière la porte, coincé entre la porte et la cuvette des toilettes, il y a un grand jeune homme noir. Il a les yeux exorbités de peur et tout son corps tremble. Il est en nage et la sueur qui lui coule sur le front n'est pas le fait de la température estivale qui règne dehors, parce que le train est surclimatisé, c'est la sueur de l'effroi. Il est habillé avec des vêtements qui ne sont pas de saison, plutôt chauds et beaucoup trop grands pour lui. Et il me regarde dans les yeux sans un mot. Il me fait juste un geste de la main. Il met son doigt sur sa bouche pour me dire de ne pas parler. Et tout de suite après, il joint ses mains pour me supplier, je le comprends en tout cas comme ça, de ne pas dénoncer sa présence de quelque façon que ce soit et à qui que ce soit. Et nous restons quelques secondes l'un et l'autre plongés dans un regard. Ça dure très longtemps pour moi, en fait, c'est une fraction de seconde. Je suis stupéfaite, je hoche la tête et je referme la porte. Mon enfant est derrière moi, il a été témoin de la scène. Et à ce moment, je pense tout de suite à des tonnes d'images qui m'arrivent en tête. Je pense que je n'étais pas à Paris, que je n'ai pas été témoin des descentes de police sous le métro aérien, où sont des tentes où dormaient dans le froid de l'hiver des dizaines de réfugiés à qui l'État français arrachait des couvertures de survie, confisquait les chaussures et entravait les associations de soutien. Et à ce moment-là, je pense aussi, je suis réveillée dans ces flashs et j'entends ma fille qui me dit qu'elle a peur. Et je me sens poisseuse de ne rien pouvoir faire et d'être interpellée dans le regard de cet homme comme ne pouvant ici et maintenant l'aider qu'en me taisant et en refermant cette porte. Je suis à ce moment-là de l'autre côté, du côté de celles et ceux qui ont un chez-soi, vers lequel je peux rentrer quelques heures plus tard, au chaud, rassasié, en sécurité. J'ai un chez-moi et je ne lui ai pas dit de venir chez moi. Je ne lui ai pas proposé de m'accompagner. J'ai un chez-moi et la seule chose que m'a demandé cet homme, en un regard et sans un mot, c'est de ne pas le dénoncer. Alors à ce moment-là, contre ma volonté, et sans que je n'ai rien fait, et précisément parce que je n'ai rien fait, je suis du côté de ce nous versus eux, versus les autres. Alors après quelques minutes après cette rencontre, le train s'arrête dans une gare et je vois sur le quai un groupe des forces de l'ordre. Il y a semble-t-il des policiers, des douaniers, des contrôleurs de la SNCF, du train, et des brigades privées de la SNCF, c'est-à-dire une milice privée, à qui les pouvoirs publics ont délégué un droit de contrôle et dont l'uniforme ressemble exactement à des unités de police. Et tout se passe très vite. Une partie des forces de l'ordre demeure sur le quai et vérifie les personnes qui descendent du train. Une autre entre dans le train et arpente les wagons. Ils demandent leur titre de transport à toutes les personnes noires et assimilées à des profils racialisés et toutes les personnes présentes dans le train. Ils ne demandent jamais les billets aux autres personnes. En même temps que leurs billets, les personnes qui sont contrôlées présentent spontanément leur carte d'identité, comme si, las d'être contrôlées plusieurs fois par semaine alors qu'elles partent travailler, elles savaient exactement que derrière cette prétendue procédure de routine, il s'agissait d'un véritable guet-apens. Et ce jour-là, j'ai lu la déception d'un agent de contrôle quand, en demandant les papiers d'un homme dans mon wagon, ce dernier a sorti sa carte d'identité française. Je n'ai pas eu le temps de voir ce qui s'est passé après. Je n'ai pas vu ce qu'il s'est passé pour le jeune homme caché dans les toilettes. Je ne sais pas s'il a été arrêté. Et je ne sais pas, je ne sais pas où il a été emmené. En tout cas, je suis sûre que les forces de l'ordre, la première chose qu'ils ont fait, c'est qu'ils sont allés vérifier les toilettes. Parce que les forces de l'ordre ont quadrillé les wagons. Deux agents coupaient les sorties, se mettaient à chaque sortie. Aucun voyageur ne pouvait se lever, aucun voyageur ne pouvait parler. Et le temps de cette opération, personne ne pouvait, au fond, contester ou protester par rapport à ce qui se passait. Quelques minutes après, le train est reparti, comme si de rien n'était. J'ai entreaperçu effectivement des personnes qui étaient sur le quai, entourées du reste des troupes en uniforme. Cette scène, ou quelques autres similaires, il y en a eu des centaines et des centaines et des centaines sur la ligne de la Côte d'Azur, là où des centaines et des centaines et des centaines de personnes vont passer leurs vacances. J'ai passé quelques mois à Nice, j'y ai vécu comme une citoyenne lambda pour des raisons professionnelles et grâce à un proche qui travaillait à la SNCF, j'ai appris que chaque semaine, un migrant, à ma connaissance, il ne s'agissait que de jeunes hommes, était blessé ou mort, mutilé ou écrasé par un train ou électrocuté sur le toit d'un wagon où il se cachait pour rejoindre la France. D'autres personnes sont mortes noyées en tentant de traverser la frontière franco-italienne en marchant sur les voies de cette ligne de carte postale. Certains de ces faits divers ont fait l'objet d'un entrefilet dans la presse locale pour expliquer la perturbation que cela avait entraîné sur le trafic. Parfois, il y avait un article pointant effectivement la crise des migrants, mais je ne crois pas avoir jamais lu quels étaient les noms de ces hommes qui, chassés, sont morts pour échapper à leurs poursuivants. J'ai aussi pris connaissance de l'intérieur, grâce à des communiqués des syndicats, des dispositifs que la direction du chemin de fer mettait en place dans la région, sur injonction ou par complaisance avec la préfecture de police ou avec la région Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur. En fait, il y avait un dispositif qui est lié aussi à une privatisation du réseau ferroviaire et qui permet de supprimer des emplois de contrôleurs qui n'ont désormais d'autre fonction que de suppléer cette chasse aux étrangers. Après, il faut savoir en fait que ça a une charge historique assez forte, puisque, comme vous le savez peut-être, à la Libération et dans le contexte où le chemin de fer français avait collaboré avec le régime nazi dans l'organisation de convois de personnes persécutées et déportées, en fait, il y a un statut des contrôleurs de la SNCF qui, après la Libération, ont pour fonction d'assurer la sécurité des voyageurs. Mais ici, en fait, la question est de quel voyageur il s'agit et qui est voyageur et qui ne l'est pas. Alors aujourd'hui, il n'y a presque plus de contrôleurs sur les lignes, il n'y a quasiment que des polices privées de la SNCF, et les contrôleurs, de toute façon, seront remplacés par des machines qui vendent des billets et des portiques électroniques à l'entrée des quais ou dans les gares, qui vérifient la validité de ces billets, mais qui sont aussi des portiques de sécurité, comme dans les aéroports. Alors si je commence mon propos s'étale sur cette anecdote, c'est que pour moi, ce n'est pas du tout une anecdote. Et qu'avec cette expérience, j'essaye, devant vous, avec vous, où je tente de redonner sens à une expérience vécue qui est restée dans les limbes du réel. Non pas au sens où elle serait irréelle, mais au sens où elle est, à proprement parler, déréalisée par la prégnance de plus en plus brutale d'un cadre d'intelligibilité qui permet de continuer à vivre en demeurant presque indifférent à l'imposition d'une ligne de fracture entre des vies épargnées et des vies traquées. De ce point de vue, je ne peux qu'énoncer une critique désespérée de l'hospitalité, dans la mesure où il s'agit selon moi d'une notion largement décalée, obsolète, voire obscène. On pourrait en effet reprendre la critique classique qui tente de réhabiliter l'hospitalité contre la violence des politiques nationales et nationalistes qui produisent, tout autant qu'elles conduisent de façon répressive et raciste, la crise migratoire. On aurait raison de rappeler le principe antique de l'hospitalité, on aurait raison de mobiliser Kant et peut-être même Derrida en tant que l'hospitalité est au fondement de la sociabilité, en transformant l'étranger en hôte et la condition de possibilité à la fois éthique et politique de toute communauté possible. On aurait raison, peut-être. Mais cela entraîne la seule, à mon sens, position politique que ce corpus, que cette bibliothèque amène avec elle, c'est une position réprobatrice à l'encontre de la politique européenne ou de celle de la plupart des États-nations, enjoignant ces derniers de restaurer, de rétablir ou d'améliorer leur politique d'hospitalité et à minima de ne pas criminaliser les actes de solidarité effectués par nombre de citoyens européens. Comme si, en fait, il existait encore quelque chose qui s'appelle l'hospitalité en Europe. Parce que soyons sérieux, à quelles conditions raisonnables peut-on ignorer, oublier que l'hospitalité dans ses usages modernes est intrinsèquement liée avec la colonisation? Je repense aux archives consultées à Aix-en-Provence, à quelques kilomètres d'ici, et qui rassemblent l'ensemble des archives de l'esclavage et de la colonisation. Et je repense à tous ces textes que j'ai pu comporter, qui rapportent le propos hilar de gouverneurs coloniaux qui débarquaient à Sainte-Lucie, à Saint-Vincent, en Martinique ou en Guadeloupe ou ailleurs dans les Caraïbes, ne se remettaient pas de la naïveté des Indiens caraïbes qui les accueillaient comme des invités de marque, alors qu'ils arrivaient comme des pilleurs et des assassins, et qu'ils en avaient conscience. Du jour où des navires ont débarqué en disant « cette terre est à moi et je suis ici chez moi », et c'est intéressant parce que dans les colonies françaises sucrières, les colons s'appelaient les habitants, c'est-à-dire s'autoproclamaient désormais les hôtes des Indiens caraïbes. Donc, avec les navires négriers, il devient absolument impossible de parler d'hospitalité. Et dans ces archives qui ne sont pas isolées, il faut rappeler effectivement que l'ensemble des colons, des gouverneurs, trouvaient que l'hospitalité des Caraïbes était complètement incroyable, qu'ils donnaient leur nourriture, qu'ils offraient leurs femmes et leurs filles, et que vraiment, ils n'avaient rien compris à ce qui était en train de se passer. Je veux dire, il n'y avait aucune ignorance de ce qui était en train de se jouer. Alors il s'agit de l'archive des dominants, mais elle est intéressante sur le fait que pour les dominants, en tout cas dans cette période coloniale et dans ces archives, l'hospitalité était terminée. Je ne peux donc pas me satisfaire d'une telle position. Aussi parce que dans notre contemporanéité, un tel raisonnement prend pour acquis qu'il nous faut toujours réfléchir à partir de l'autre. L'hospitalité, je la récuse parce que je ne veux pas réfléchir à partir du point de vue de l'autre. Je ne veux pas réfléchir à partir du point de vue de ce nous qui accueille, sans jamais interroger qui est ce nous, comment est-il constitué et qui le compose réellement. Ce nous nous enferme dans une rhétorique qui finalement réifie une communauté et qui pose contre cette communauté les autres, qui pose dans une relation antagonique les autres et les invités, et qui pose aussi un chez-soi et un ailleurs. Un chez-soi qui accueille et un ailleurs hostile que l'on fuit. Les nationaux et les étrangers. Mais au fond, comment le nous peut-il d'emblée se comprendre dans la définition fort close du national? Comment peut-il d'emblée se comprendre dans la définition fort close du national? Parce que sa généalogie est proprement impériale. En outre, ne pas remettre en question ce cadre, c'est accepter que la contradiction glose sur les conditions de l'hospitalité. Inviter, accueillir, héberger au pied levé, dépanner pour quelques nuits, être mis devant le fait accompli de devoir accueillir quelqu'un, comme si l'invité était mal élevé de se présenter comme ça de façon inopinée. Et puis il s'agit de maintenir la souveraineté de l'hôte. Il n'invite que qui il choisit. Il n'accueille que qui il veut, avec la formule « faites comme chez vous ». Mais c'est une formule qui est réservée qu'à certains de ses invités et pas à tous. Et d'ailleurs, le « faites comme chez vous » suppose que l'invité est déjà un peu le même que moi, finalement. C'est pour ça qu'il peut faire comme s'il était chez moi. L'invité doit s'intégrer aux us et coutumes du foyer. Et puis d'autres questions demeurent. On ne peut pas accueillir tout le monde. Il n'y a pas assez de lits, il n'y a pas assez à manger dans le frigo, il n'y a pas assez d'espace. Bref, l'hospitalité est une analogie monstrueuse qui, à mon sens, pense la communauté politique sur le modèle du foyer. Le pays sur celui de la maison, le monde sur celui de l'organisation du pater familia. Que les États européens foulent du pied aujourd'hui les principes élémentaires de l'hospitalité n'est pas exagéré. Enfin, c'est pas exagéré de dire ça, à mon sens, mais ce n'est peut-être pas tout à fait juste de réfléchir ainsi. Il me semble plutôt que les États européens appliquent juste une hospitalité assez classique, décidant qui est invité, qui mérite de l'être et comment mériter l'hospitalité. Plus fondamentalement encore, réfléchir depuis ce nous du pater familia, c'est en interroger les sous-bassements, c'est nécessairement prendre pour objet l'autre, lui dénier toute subjectivité, toute puissance d'agir, le réduire à n'être qu'un objet de pitié, de mépris, de peur ou de haine, et le mettre dans une relation de dépendance et d'être constamment dans un mode où il doit quelque chose à son hôte. Donc je ne suis pas ce nous. Et je refuse de l'être. Dans la vallée de la Roya, pas très loin aussi, donc autour de Nice, autour notamment de Cédric Héroux, dont vous avez peut-être entendu parler, qui est un cultivateur, un paysan qui a beaucoup œuvré pour pas accueillir du tout, mais pour organiser la résistance dans la vallée de la Roya avec les exilés. On préfère parler de solidarité plutôt que d'hospitalité. La nuance me semble fondamentale. Le terme de solidarité n'est certes pas du tout satisfaisant. On pourrait le critiquer et il est, dans une certaine mesure, utile, mais certainement que ce n'est pas le meilleur. Pourtant, la solidarité me fait penser ici que ce qui est en jeu, finalement, c'est la façon dont nos vies sont interpellées par des vies que l'on rend, à proprement parler, invivables et que l'on expose au risque maximal de mort. Des vies qu'on laisse mourir et que l'on fait mourir, mais à travers, justement, cette biopolitique, en faisant mourir ces vies, en les exposant au risque de mort, ce que l'on fait mourir à travers elles, c'est la capacité éthique d'être touché, révolté par ce qui se passe sous nos fenêtres, dans nos villes, dans nos montagnes, dans nos trains. Ce que fait mourir ce que l'on fait mourir en même temps que ces vies, c'est le fait de pouvoir justement entrer en solidarité. Et ce que l'on produit en termes de subjectivité, c'est des vies qui se sentent épargnées, protégées en comparaison de ce qui arrive à autrui, et qui sont rassurées de se sentir protégées, parce que finalement, on n'est pas dans la rue, on n'est pas persécuté, etc., etc. Donc ce que l'on fait mourir, c'est précisément cette capacité qu'on pourrait également considérer de sentir avec, se faire avec. Et c'est cette idée aussi qu'on induit, on produit, on crée à l'intérieur une forme de conscience amnésique, de conscience anesthésiée, qui est de se sentir en sécurité, alors qu'à côté de nous, des vies sont traquées. Cette façon donc dont nos vies sont interpellées est bien différente de l'appel à l'hospitalité. La solidarité, c'est celle qui, face à la réduction de certains êtres à des proies, me pousse non pas à les recueillir comme des bêtes apeurées, c'est-à-dire encore comme des bêtes, mais bien à ne pas me sentir moi-même à l'abri, chez moi, mais bien de me sentir moi-même traquée. Et donc à m'encourager à sortir, à me mettre à proprement parler hors de moi. La solidarité me pousse à me mettre hors de moi-même, justement. Ne pas accueillir, mais sortir de moi-même. À m'élever contre le pouvoir qui traque, qui chasse et qui abat. La solidarité qui se tisse ici entre des êtres, c'est celle d'une lutte, d'une révolte, contre un pouvoir qui désormais abat ceux qui, ensemble, défendent le droit inaliénable à vivre ici ou ailleurs, et qui font face, selon une graduation de technologies répressives, à un même gouvernement. L'enjeu ici est donc de défendre la vie, ou plus exactement, l'enjeu ici est de se sauver. Mais je veux dire de se sauver tous. Parce que nous sommes déjà morts, si nous pouvons dormir tranquilles, quand chez nous, des vies sont devenues tuables. Voilà, je vous remercie.
Thank you, Elsa. And we might have later the chance of discussing this shift from hospitality into solidarity. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to Anjalika Sagar, who is the co-founder of the very well-known artistic platform and group, Autolic Group, with Kojo Eshum. And I really wanted to put these three thinkers, activists, artists, writers together to show what does it mean today to act in contemporary conditions from a very complex place, which is not longer the artist or the writer or the intellectual as we imagined before. So I think that the three of them really represent really well what is to work with a very similar archive and along the same struggles, but with different methodologies and formalizing these thoughts differently. So please welcome Anjalika Sagar.
Oh, there's so much to say, but very nervous actually. I just would like to say first thank you to my panel, thank you to Paul, thank you to Elsa for your brilliant talk, and to Sandi. It's really good to be with you all here. Just to say that we do need to have a lot of courage these days. The sites of conflict have potential, but we need courage. So I am one half of what we have called the Otolith Group. I just want to give you, I'm going to show a clip from a film we made called Hydra Decapita in 2010. The film is about 30 minutes long, but I'm just going to show 5 minutes. And I thought just before showing the film, I would talk about just a little bit about the Otolith group. The name Otolith, for those who don't know, comes from this. It's basically to describe the crystals deep within our inner ear that guide our orientation and balance in the world. This comes from our first film that we made in 2002, where we performed 26 parabolic flights with the Russian Space Agency. The film was about my grandmother, who was a feminist in India and an educationalist, and her friendship with Valentina Tereshkova, meeting of women from the Soviet Republic and Indian feminists. Always, like, these stories of hers inspired me long before I saw the photographs of these meetings, actually. So we wanted to make a film where we were thinking about how this, within this essayistic structure. So we were interested in the idea of microgravity and decided to call ourselves the Otolith Group #1, actually, in order to stop people asking us where we are from, so they could categorize us, think they could understood us. I am originally from India. Koja, my collaborator, is originally from Ghana. We were both born in the UK in the 60s, and I'm very glad of it. I'm glad of it because it's given me and Kojo the chance to develop what we understand of what we think of as mutational aesthetics. So before I go any further, just to say that this film, just because you won't see it all, I'll just say quickly that you'll hear a singing voice. It is me singing, John Ruskin. And just to say also, and just like a thought to think about while you're watching it, is stop thinking about blackness in terms of identity politics. Think about it as a way to all disidentify with the identity politics that are being used upon us. So just, if you could just play the film from the beginning, and please, if it's possible, to turn all the lights down. Is that possible? So we really, because the film is it possible to turn the lights down on the stage, or? Because the film is all in black and you won't see it otherwise. Yay, thank you.
I think the noblest sea that Turner has ever painted, and if so, the noblest ever painted by man, is that of the slave ship. The chief academy picture of the exhibition of 1840. It is a sunset on the Atlantic after a prolonged storm, but the storm is partially lulled, and the torn and streaming rain clouds are moving in scarlet lines to lose themselves in the hollow of the night.
This may have been the starting point, but it wasn't the final stage. It's just a theoretical starting point, a conjecture. We don't even know that's true. We're just basing it on observables. Black men, African American community. That's theoretical, but technically we do not know where these beings came from. As I said previously, this is a world within itself. Okay, we could take on human form, but in this particular world, human form was left at the door and you took on another guise. Spiritually. So, this information that you read here is more or less for the man on the street to give him a better understanding of the origins of things.
So in my nervousness, I forgot to thank the LUMA Foundation, Maya Hoffman and Hansa Kobrist. Thank you all for inviting me. So I'm going to, much of our work is, all of our work really is research-oriented. I'm going to talk about this film and some of the areas of research that went into this film. This film, as I said, is called Hydra Decapita. You cannot see the blacks. The film is about the ocean, but we don't shoot the ocean as such throughout the film. You see it in the beginning, at the end, but it's you don't really see the blacks in this light. Anyway, there are a few areas of research that brought this film about. Firstly, we looked at the relationship between finance capitalism and death through the Atlantic slave trade. And we focused on a case in 1781 in which a slave ship called the Zong was traveling from Jamaica to Liverpool in England with a cargo of Africans. The ship became lost, and the captain decided to throw 133 slaves overboard to murder them all, and then to claim the insurance for the loss of that cargo. The case came to trial in 1783, but it was not a case of murder. It was a case of two competing claims about insurance. This was a historical moment for us in which the regime of justification of economics trumps questions of atrocity and becomes, for us, a case study of how financial capitalism operates and continues to operate necropolitically. Hydra de Capita is a way of connecting this historical atrocity to the present of financial capitalism via a few other routes. We link the 1781 atrocity to J.M.W. Turner's painting, The Slave Ship from 1840, which attempts to visualize this atrocity. Then we link that to John Ruskin's 1843 text from Modern Painters, Volume 1, in which he talks about Turner's methodology for painting water, and he refers to this painting. And I sing Ruskin here as an improvised piece, because William Morris from the Arts and Crafts movement would famously get up at parties and sing John Ruskin's sort of beautiful criticism of artworks. And these people were all very much connected to this case of the Zong, actually, and part of the anti-slavery movement in Britain, which is a whole other story. So anyway, there is another story in this film, and that is the story of Drexciya, an African-American electronic duo from the early 90s from Detroit, who created a mythos on their album covers and record sleeves and titled their music as The Names of Storms. They were drawing the afterlives of the drowned and murdered slaves who lived on and become superheroes and heroines and managed to breathe underwater in what they called a bubble utopia. This subconscious world of the post-slave who has survived and mutated underwater between home and the world, appealed as mutation, has for us, it's in various registers. It's both historical and aesthetic, it is methodological and it is anthropological, it is ontological and it is political, and it allows us to move between registers. Whereas in the 90s people might have narrated this film or our work in terms of identity, we prefer to narrate it in terms of mutation. The title of this film is also related to another mythos created by the Puritan elders to justify mercantile seafaring capitalists, the early pirates, who needed to cite a myth, early pirates and colonialists, who needed to cite a myth to justify and announce the necessary killing of those who resisted them. They saw themselves, as the Puritan elders, as Hercules, while the Hydra, and I quote, and the Hydra is a many-headed serpent, consisted of those who questioned the authority of minister and magistrate, the expansion of empire, the definition of private property, and the subordination of women. The Hydra, and I quote, and I'm quoting from a book called The Many-Headed Hydra by Marcus Reidecker and Peter Limbaugh, which was kind of a book that we researched for this film. The Hydra becomes a means of exploring multiplicity, movement, freedom, and connection, the long waves and planetary currents of humanity. The multiplicity was indicated in the multitudes who gathered at the market, in the fields, on the piers and the ships, on the plantations, on the battlefields. The power of numbers was expanded by movement as the Hydra journeyed and voyaged or was banished or dispersed in diaspora, carried by the winds and the waves beyond the boundaries of the nation state. Sailors, pilots, felons, lovers, translators, musicians, mobile workers of all kinds made new and unexpected connections, which variously appeared to be accidental, contingent, transient, and even miraculous. So these Puritans created this myth that the pirates, the colonials, were Hercules, and they'd constantly have to kill this Hydra, lop off the heads of the multitude as such. It is that world of surface actors that the many-headed Hydra, a singular body of diverse proportions, and the world of the drowned that we bring together in the discourse of this film. They host a transnational being speaking the unconscious, the deep sea, the crimes of capitalism and racism, and their interchanging in roles. But there is another story that is present that now emerges within the context of the UK, and that is of Windrush, the Windrush generation of Caribbean migrants who came to Britain in 1948 to 1971. another boat, named after the HMT Empire Windrush. This was the boat that carried some of the first arrivals. Their right to British citizenship was enshrined in law in 1971. That applied even to those without migration papers, like children who travelled on a parent's passport. Many were therefore legally resident without the papers to prove it. And I think it's very important to kind of take on what has happened in Britain by, this crazy Theresa May and her vultures, throwing out these elderly Caribbean people. This is like really stabbing at the heart of a kind of struggle that has been really much, completely part of my entire life. There is so much that these Caribbean people have in common with Britain. They were so generous that they took on Britishness, learnt its rules, became educated in British education systems. That is a generosity, You do not throw people out who have been that generous, who have worked in the train, on buses and in trains and in many, many different jobs, and nurses, many nurses. So, I want to quote Dick Hebdige here, who writes in Subcultures and the Meaning of Style in 1979, just to bring class into all of this a little bit. These West Indian immigrants held too much cultural space in common with their white working class neighbours to allow any open antagonism to develop. Confirmed Anglophiles, even when at home in Jamaica, they shared the same goals, sought the same diversions, a pint of beer, a game of darts, a dance on Saturday night. Of course, things failed to improve at the expected rate, and by the early 70s, full employment appeared a remote possibility, indeed, a moment dimly remembered. For these people to be forcibly sent back to Jamaica, a country they left when they were like 5 or 6, maybe, older. For these people to be sent back to Jamaica or to a detention centre in the UK, to lose their homes and their jobs and their right to national health, well, this is nothing but disgusting. For these people to be attacked after 40 to 60 years of living, working, voting and paying taxes in Britain and in Europe strikes at the heart of all the struggles against racism in the UK. And, oh, sorry. Oh, right. Sorry. I was trying to get it all in. Strikes at the heart of all the struggles against racism in the UK, and strikes at the heart of all of the struggles. And I think of a certain figure that is very important to people of our generation in the UK, and that is Stuart Hall. And I quote Stuart Hall, Great Britain's, especially in relation to this Brexit madness as well, Great Britain's greatness is bound up with empire, Stuart Hall once wrote. Euroscepticism and Little Englander nationalism could hardly survive if people understood whose sugar flowed through English blood and rotted English teeth. Stuart Hall, as some of you may know, was the Jamaican-born cultural theorist, political activist, and Marxist sociologist, and he was one of the Windrush generation. And he came to the rotten land of Britain with its in-part slave-generated wealth from Kingston in 1951 as a Rhodes Scholar to study at Oxford. I met him a few times in my life, but I asked myself what he would have thought of rotten Britain now, considering the recent events surrounding the violent expulsion of elderly Jamaicans, or indeed of the rise of racism, nationalism across Europe. Stuart Hall also gave birth to a very important department in Birmingham called Department of Cultural Studies, which probably you all know about. But cultural studies really had a massive influence on, say, the childhood of a brown child in London or a black child in London. Why? Because Stuart Hall said, forget about this, forget about art, look at music, look at television, look at what's going on, look at what these people from all these different cultures are producing in the UK. And Stuart Hall was on television when we were children, when I was a teenager or bit younger than a teenager, on Open University, and he would be deconstructing the media. It became really trendy, you know, from the 70s to the 80s to be anti-racist, because racism is what we are talking about. And when we talk about empathy, I think it's really important to understand what we mean by that. Empathy is not enough. The empathy is being destroyed in us, because empathy, isn't it a practice? Isn't empathy a practice? How do we practice empathy? We cannot practice empathy unless we understand what racism is. We cannot practice understanding what racism is unless we deal with difference. And that means dealing with people who are very different to us. That means dealing with people who are culturally different to us, who make arguments, who have discussions, who can criticize and argue together. I think of this kind of, I'm not really interested in terms like, you know, I think to think sociologically and around sort of multiculturalism, these ideas of solutions like integration. What does that mean? Integrating into what exactly? I mean, how can you integrate? Assimilation, why? Tolerance, I mean, for tolerance, why do we have to be tolerant? I mean, it's ridiculous. You know, I'm more interested in this idea of convivial antagonism. It's only through convivial antagonism that I think one understands how to constantly question the idea of, you know, this patriarchal host who is, you know, making you feel rather, you know, uncomfortable basically all the time. And it is important to, I think, certainly when I look back at my life, I am aware that I, as a black British person, because I think of blackness intersectionally and politically rather than in relation to colour, I think of blackness as the submerged voices of all the dead slaves who are in the Black Atlantic. I had the chance to be an artist and be here now because I had the chance to criticize colonialism in the classroom with friends in university. Nobody who has, people who haven't, working class people who haven't got any money cannot go to university anymore. You know, what is that doing? That is creating a singular group, control group, who just agree with each other, you know? And you don't have racial difference that much in the classroom. You don't have class difference in the classroom. How can we argue? You know, I was at school with people from many different class backgrounds. All my friends were working class, Irish or white British. They were not the white middle class kids. They were the most hostile, even though they wore Dunlops and Oshkosh and their parents were artists or whatever. It was actually the working class kids. And I remember a film that changed my life when I was younger on television by Hanif Qureshi. Maybe some of you have seen it. If not, you should. Called My Beautiful Laundrette, where a punk, a racist punk, falls in love with the son of a laundrette, a Pakistani son of a laundrette owner. And there's a beautiful scene from which the camera looks at from the two-way mirror, where the punk, Daniel Day-Lewis, played by Daniel Day-Lewis, and I've forgotten the name of, stupidly, of this actor who probably never got a job again after being in that film, were snogging and spitting in each other's mouths and kissing. And it struck me at that point, yeah, the reason I like white working class racists is because actually they are quite nice underneath it all, and basically they just want to have a fight. And it is, you know, we can actually argue with each other. And maybe it's about desire. Maybe this idea of a single origin, as kind of Glisson talks about a lot, I mean, it is pointless. Entanglement means intimacy. It means making music. It means loving each other. It means understanding so many things. I mean, for me, music culture was a way to deal with all this British racism because punk and reggae were so interlinked. And I think I'll leave it there because there's a lot more to say about other things, and we can do it in a discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anjalika. I hope that we will have time for discussion and picking up questions and so on. Let's see. And it is now my great pleasure to invite to speak speak to Sandi Hilal, who is the co-founder of Decolonizing Architecture, a platform that has been working on the West Bank for a long time and now moved for the first time to Europe, and that I think is doing one of the most interesting works, both on decolonizing issues that have to do with building the nation state and understanding citizenship, but also with understanding architecture in Europe now within what is being called current crisis of refugees, and that I think this would pick up on that and change the way we look at it. And so welcome, Sandi. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me here. And actually, what I would like to do with you is to take you through a journey that I myself did from Palestine to Sweden. A very, very privileged journey, yet I feel inspired by also the first session. I feel there are a lot of shared intuition, right? And I would like to take you within this intuition and what does it mean actually to do such a journey from Palestine to Sweden. And before moving to Sweden, I would like only to tell you very quickly what was it that we did in Palestine. And in Palestine, I worked for so many years in refugee camps, and I was part of a collective that is very much obsessed of how can we understand decolonization today. And actually living under colonialism, you feel it's not a luxury to understand what decolonization is today. You feel it's an urgency. No, I need to live my everyday life under colonialism, yet I need to react and I need to make a sense out of it, right? And in that sense, we did so many things also together with refugees in order to decolonize this image, static image of refugees being only miserable objects that needs to be held and that needs only to be sort of supported by the international community. And in a sense, I think that I moved to Europe after living so many years in refugee camps and after seeing refugees being political subjects. And I guess this is what maybe I was very much looking behind in a place like Europe. And I have to say that the move to Europe was not something that I desire. It was much more a very practical reasons of my husband getting a post of professorship in Sweden and by the Israelis not giving us a family reunion. And deep in our minds also we felt finally maybe the struggle to decolonization is not anymore only in the colonies, but it's happening now, finally, in Europe, in the house of the colonial power, right? And we very much wanted to engage with this. And yet I remember very strongly, I was very much worried and concerned about this move to Sweden. And I remember my father asking me, but I cannot understand you, no? I mean, you are living under occupation, under colonialism. You are taking finally your kids outside of Palestine and in one of the places that are considered actually the best place where to raise your kids. And I said, what is it that you are afraid of? And I remember actually answering him is that what I am really afraid of, or what I don't feel I am ready for, is to become a foreigner, right? And in which way I still be having my agency, I mean political agency by being only a foreigner. Is it possible actually to still gain political agency by being guests or not? So, I mean, now I will take you to my journey to Sweden, but please keep in mind all these, worries that I brought with me, because this is where the project, this is why I ended up by doing the project I'm doing right now in Sweden. So my first visit to the location of the project, which is in north of Sweden, and in a tiny city called Boden. And it has been maybe the first time I heard about this name, and I was commissioned by the Public Art Agency, which is a governmental institution that deals with public art, to do a project in Boudin. And I had to Google it, and to see what Boudin is. And by Googling it, the only thing that comes for you in Google, that Boudin is a city that Sweden built in order to protect the northern part of Sweden from a potential war to come from Russia. And I went there for the first time in November last year, and it was a shock for me. I mean, coming from the Middle East, I arrived 30 degrees below zero, dark. I mean, at 2 p.m., it was already, the sun was already gone. And I was taken in that same day, which was completely, I mean, to add to my shock, another shock, I was taken to see all these amazing, I have to say, structures that was built for the military to survive such cold and to still be actually protecting the border part of Sweden. So I was taken into these bunkers, structures where, the soldiers were standing, and you would see everything. It's intact, no? The city stays with almost, I mean, it would be a perfect museum, a perfect military museum, because everything remains almost the same. And I remember myself sort of asking my guide, because the guide was quite, rightly, he was very proud about what Boudin and this all amazing military structure that is there. And I was asking him, but the war never arrived. And I have to say that he had a sort of slight of disappointment in his eyes, because of course it is a project that was never fulfilled, right? I mean, you built a whole city for a war that's supposed to come, and this war never arrived. So what you do with this project? I mean, how can you rethink completely the city again, right? So he, and in that sense, I was myself troubled is what to do with a place that was basically built as a military place, and yet, because it was built this way, it became one of the most important access for refugees to Sweden. So refugees were sent to Boden because it was actually, it lost its purpose of being military place, and it became an access for refugees. Yet, I think that there was no connection between the war that never arrives and the side effect of refugees arriving to that place. And I felt immediately that this was majorly what I can do in a place like Boden, and I immediately asked them, please bring me to see refugees. I mean, I appreciate this military amazing bases, but maybe I need human faces, I need refugees. And then the answer to my I need refugees, I was taken to what all the time refugees should look like, to a place called the Yellow House in Boden. And the Yellow House was built throughout what was called in Sweden the 1 million program, where these social houses were built. And there was 9 huge buildings in the city of Boden that built during the 70s. And it was very much a place that is discriminated by the rest of the inhabitants, because it was social, Swedes were living there, not refugees, but it was yet considered a place where drugs and people that are behaving badly. And so it had already a very bad reputation. And for a very strange reason, they destroyed 8 of these buildings and kept 1. And they call it the Yellow House. And this is where big part of refugees are sent, right? In that sense, it's only now lived by refugees. And this social housing and the whole idea of discrimination was completely taken back to refugees. And when I arrived there, I felt... I have to say that maybe I have never witnessed such depression in my entire life. You get inside these rooms and there is this feeling of, we did all this journey to arrive here. This is not the Sweden we thought about, right? They were shocked, and this is not what we did the journey for, and they had no life. They knew where, they had no place where to go. And the maximum that they will be doing is to go downstairs to smoke a cigarette in 25 degrees below zero, or to go to the supermarket to buy things while they don't have enough money, right? So there is nothing that can be done there. And I thought, you know, in that evening, I was completely devastated and thought that there is nothing that can be done in this place. And all this, you know, coming out of a Palestinian refugee camps, political subjectivity, struggle of decolonization, all this, I saw nothing there. I thought, here, there is nothing. And it's completely nonsense to think that you can do anything beyond the context. The context is what limits you, right? And here it's a complete limitation. I can do nothing. But in a sense, also living, being raised under colonialism, you don't give up easily. So the day after, I woke up in the morning and I come back to the Yellow House, and I began to ask if they know anybody that is planning to stay in Boden, because all the refugees I met in the Yellow House expressed for me the desire of leaving Boden, and they were thinking that maybe their journey did not finish yet. Maybe if they will arrive to Stockholm or to Malmö or what they call the south of Sweden, they might find the Sweden that they were looking for, right? So, and in that sense, it was, maybe my question was a rhetorical question, but surprisingly enough, I had an answer for this, and they say, yeah, you should meet Yasmin and Brahim. And I thought that if Yasmin and Brahim saw something in Boden, they might illuminate me. No? I might find a way finally to do the project. And in a sense, I immediately called Yasmin and Brahim, and I was with two members of the Public Art Agency, the governmental institution. So I was basically with two people representing the Swedish government. And of course, Yasmin and Brahim says, of course, come to our house. And as soon as we cross the threshold of their house, Yasmin and Brahim were hosting us. And they were, and in that sense, the two persons that were with me from the government were asking, should we take away our shoes? Do you normally take away your shoes when you get inside the house? And they say, yeah, please take away your shoes. They would get in. We were drinking coffee, speaking Arabic, and I had to translate some of what we were saying to the Swedish government. And then we ate makluba, and there was a yogurt, and they were not knowing if they would put the yogurt to the rice or not. And at the sudden, I was looking at all this, and I was thinking, oh my God, in this tiny living room, two couples of Syrian refugees are hosting the Swedish government. And for me, I thought this is what the project should be about. And in that sense, I think that Yasmin and Brahim didn't give up with their right to host and become a host in that place, and not only a guest. And I believe that this was the major reason of why they decided to stay in Boden, because they sort of opened up their house. And maybe, again, in that very tiny living room, it brought me back, you know, to my to the period I was living in Palestine during the first Intifada. And during the first Intifada, Israelis shut down schools and universities. And people immediately transformed their living room in schools, into university, into even courts. And in a sense, also, it reminds me very strongly, it was a sort of a flash of images, you know, while these couple of refugees hosting the government, many images were coming to my mind. I was thinking very strongly about when I was doing a project in Gaza for a reconstruction of a neighborhood that was destroyed. And I was walking throughout the streets of Gaza, and you know, the thing that struck me all the time is that people leave their sofas in their destroyed houses. And I became very much obsessed with why they leave the sofas. And they were explaining to me that the living room is the only place where you don't need intimacy, right? You can sit outside and you can still sort of acting your life and using your house. So you would see in Gaza a lot of destroyed houses with no walls, but sofas, and people still be using their houses. And in that sense, the whole project was built very much around all the notion of when you don't belong to the public. You know, one of the things that happens immediately with refugees crossing the borders, first of all, they lose their right to host, and secondly, they are required to act and behave as a perfect guests. And they are also taught, while doing the courses of language and many other things, how to behave in the public. And what does that mean? And of course, you know, being faced in a place like Sweden, where the public space is highly codified. I mean, you really need, it's almost like learning a language, learning how to behave in a place like the Swedish public, right? And in that sense, I believe people don't feel that they have these codes, or as if they don't speak that language, they don't have the codes to belong to. And yet the only thing, so the question was, what happens when you don't belong to the public? And I believe many, in a very invisible way, create the public in their own private, in their own living rooms, and in that sense transforming these living rooms into places for learning, or places to be together and to become back a political subject. And yet I felt very strongly that in a place like Europe, and at a sudden hospitality become back a very important manner in many ways coming here, and I feel that it is the nerve of how we can understand decolonization today. Who is the guest and who is the host? And is it possible to understand the act of hosting as a way of gaining back political subjectivity? Is it possible to understand where are the places where whoever lost actually his ability to be a political agency can act? And in that sense, maybe I would like to bring you to one major thing that I was all the time thinking is that to be an integral human, you need to be a guest and the host. And in that sense, I am inviting you not to think about this project as only a project about refugees. I think that Europe, as never, is in need of understanding. European people citizens are in need of understanding how they can be guests and hosts, because also thinking that you can be only hosting, thinking that you can be only the master, you would lose what comes with being guests, right? And in which way we can still be understanding today the political struggle as understanding us as an integral humans. And I don't think that we can gain back our integrity if we don't accept the fact that sometimes we are guests and sometimes we are hosts. And I think that this is the real crisis of refugees today, is that who is hosting and who is hosted, and how can we host these people, and how if we can imagine hospitality becoming the struggle, the revolution, the way where refugees actually demand their right to host, and yet even citizens demand their right to be guests, but also demand their right to host. I mean, in that sense, you mentioned, no, I was there, powerless, and I did not have my right to host that person. I mean, I felt complete powerless in front of my kids by not exercising my right to host, right? So I think that here we are all losing. We are losing our right to host, and we are losing our ability to be political subjects today. So in that sense, maybe I would only take you back to this image. You know, leaving Palestine, and especially when you leave after 12 years of work, we did long works with refugees, and everybody was asking us then, what happened after you leave? What is the impact you left? And all these questions that normally many ask, and especially donors and the ones that gives you money is asking you then, what is the impact? What you left behind you in Palestine? And I was all the time, for some reason, very disturbed about this question, even though, I mean, I can write reports on what is happening behind us in Palestine. I think that what we left in Palestine, we left seeds, and these seeds would become tree alone and autonomous, and we can still be claiming them, but I don't think that it's ethical to claim what is happening behind us in Palestine. And I was asking myself, why am I that disturbed? I mean, why am I antagonizing the person that is asking me what happened after you leave in Palestine? And most probably because I had a complete different concern. And my concern was, what am I having in my luggage by going to Sweden? No? Is it possible that I can actually go to Sweden and still be contributing to what is there? Is it possible to have a luggage that can help me to understand how today I can act in a place like Sweden, and how can I bring the knowledge, and how can Palestine be an inspiring place for Sweden, which seems to be completely, almost unacceptable, no? That Palestinians will teach Swedes. It's all the time Swedes would teach Palestinians, and in that sense, how can you contribute? I mean, in that sense, I'm not speaking about Swedes and Palestinians. I'm speaking generally about how there is a world that is teaching and another world that is learning constantly, right? And in that sense, I thought that the only maybe thing that I can bring with me from Palestine is my pillows of my living room there, where I would, in order not to forget, I would write all the words that were essential for me in the struggle of decolonization in Palestine, and understand how in each place I am staying, even if for 2 weeks, I would still be exercising my right to host. And in that sense, you know, we were just inaugurating an exhibition in Abu Dhabi called Permanent Temporariness, and I brought these cushions with me in my luggage, and I immediately did my living room, and I hosted all the NYU campus. And in that sense, at a sudden, I felt I became the one hosting, and in a sense, I immediately gained agency even for 10 days. So in a sense, and this is also, it's my house, and we decided to open our house in Stockholm as a place and it's called Madafa in Arabic, and Madafa is the room for hospitality. And, you know, I would like also to bring you back of what hospitality in Arabic means. No, hosting, dafa is adding on something, right? It's just like, it's when you are hosting or being hosting, you are adding to each other. So it's from the verb add, the hospitality comes. So in that sense, in which way we can add to each other rather than exercise power on each other is what this project is behind. And, you know, now in the Yellow House, we were granted, in Boden, we were granted an apartment down in the garden, and we will be opening this apartment as a hospitality, as a madafa for refugees, where they are the ones hosting the city of Boden, they are hosting the mayor, they are hosting the institutions. So in that sense, how to create all these spaces, from departing from my own living room to the living room of Yasmin and Brahim, to the living room in the Yellow House, to the living room in the NYU, to many other living rooms, in order to shift dynamics, in order for the guest and the host to be completely exchanging their roles, and in order for these, for it to be a possible place for a new struggle in order to regain back political subjectivity today in Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sandi, for this very passionate story and about your own journey, and which is really also getting us very close to your own practice of decolonizing architecture. And after being here for a few hours, I feel the need not just to say something, but also to open the possibility for you to say something, because it seems that we're a lot speaking about like hosting and being a guest, but we're hosting you, but in a kind of hostile way, in the sense that we don't give you the possibility of speaking or saying anything. So I like to, before even asking any questions, I like to ask if anyone from the audience would have a question, a comment, something to say. Si vous avez quelques questions, vous pouvez le faire en français aussi. Okay, you can think about the questions if it's not ready in your mind, and meanwhile I can also. For me, one of the things that was really interesting while listening to the three of you is that you are really bringing, each of you, a different grammar, a different way of thinking about hospitality. And I guess that one of the things that was common to all the ways in which you are undoing this notion and redoing this notion maybe is trying to go beyond the framework of identity politics. Really, like, in a sense that, and I think that this might be one of the traps, that basically we're still very much trying to think the struggle of constructing society, whatever it is, if it's being outside or inside or trying to belong to the network, in terms of identity politics and identification. And this was coming up very strongly in your talk when you were speaking about I really like it, the aesthetic of mutation instead of identification, and you were calling for disidentification. And I hear the same thing in your talk, in a sense, when you're really asking us or inviting us to disidentify ourselves as guest or host, and really shifting those positions and trying to move constantly from one position to the other one. And even in your way of undoing hospitality through solidarity by, in your case, dissolving the position of the host and the guest, right? So I wanted to ask you about identity politics, and because it seems to me that this has been the framework for the last, not even 20, but 40 years, for all the struggles that we are been fighting for. And also the way in which these struggles have been translated within the institution in terms of politics of representation, in terms of in the museum, in terms of exhibitions, and so on. So how do you see, as artists, as architects, activists, writer, what is the horizon towards we are moving, which is not identity politics, and how could we act there? I don't know if this is a very complex question, but I like to hear what are your thoughts in relation to that.
I think of it like being, in a sort of fun fair in those dodgem cars, where you're sort of constantly having to dodge the kind of perceptions that... I'm going to speak very personally about this, because I think it's, of course, we are engaged in black study, as Fred Moten puts it. We have been engaged in, from the beginning in the history of the non-aligned movement. Why? Because I was very quickly aware in the UK that there was a desire to kind of, put you in a box, categorize you as an Indian. Oh, you must have arranged marriages, you must have this, you eat smelly food, go back to your own country. It was like, no, actually I come from 3 generations of feminists, communists, so just go to hell. And all these ridiculous perceptions. In fact, I think one has to think about what happens on the imperial periphery, as Leela Gandhi puts it. The imperial periphery being the place where there was solidarity between, leftists in the UK and in India, and these sort of pan-Asian, transnational kind of feminists. That's where you find a kind of, complex politics of relation kind of happening, and of love and of intimacy. So I think for me, the idea of creating this, rock group. I think of Otolith Group in a way like a band, I wanted to be, I was a musician for many years, and I didn't want to, it became impossible to have a band because I was singing kind of a lot of like guitar music, and a lot of people thought, oh, how can Indians make music like that, I was more, and then I sort of became more attracted to free jazz in order to think more about how absorption happens. So if you put free jazz and their relation to Indian music together, you get kind of circuits of absorption and improvisation and listening, as opposed to fusion, which was like Peter Gabriel Real World music label, which was extremely irritating, with all this world music just irritating the hell out of me. So as a musician, I was always more interested in forms of absorption to create complex states, complex references, and to take those and say, this is what we are going to do. Kojo and I have been practicing for 16 years now, and we have done a lot of things, make work about many different subjects. But if we're going to talk about identity, the work has all been about trying to complicate different perceptions, or that has been very much part of it. Mutational aesthetics are so much part of our lives. It's difficult to say it is about the deconstruction of kind of racist identity that people impose on us. Of course, that makes it exciting, It is exciting to dislocate perceptions. One is dealing with racism. We are in a more racist society now than I have ever experienced, not only in the UK, in Europe, in India as well. We talked, I think Mantia was talking about the kind of hospitality that you experience in the global south, but, in an Indian context, there is no empathy, I was making a film about, recently, Rabindranath Tagore created this school in West Bengal, and I was making a film about it with Kojo for the last 5 months, and this art school, and Rabindranath Tagore was a great figure, maybe some of you know who he is, but the students, painting, doing sculpture, whatever, I was like, just step outside the grounds and look at the water, look at the dirt, look at the poverty, look at people around you, and isn't that an art project to go and talk to those people? Isn't it like, isn't it? And they're so, that's so political, and then we got told off by the vice principal for being too political. So empathy, that's another subject, but in terms of disidentifying, I think this involves aesthetics. This involves a kind of practice.
I don't know, maybe I would like to still be answering your questions by insisting that maybe we should shift the whole thing and speaking about rights. What are the rights that we want to have today? And in that sense, maybe the rights within citizenship was all the time inscribed in the last period as our right to be citizens within a nation state. And I have a feeling that in that sense, this is completely the cage where we are living. And when you ask this question, in my mind was, even I would like to have the right, I want to have the right to write my own story, right? In that sense, I don't want someone else to write the story on my behalf. I want to have the right to host. And in a sense, I began saying that I am a privileged person that does a journey that many others are forced to, yet I am sharing with them a condition of permanent temporariness, right? And living in a temporary manner, sometimes for so long time, and it seems that as temporary people, we have no right to rights, and that the rights are only tied to permanency and only tied to us being a citizen within only one and therefore to identify with one identity, So you are given your rights the moment you are loyal to that certain place, right? And I think that what we what I am personally behind, that is it possible to understand citizenship today based on rights and not only based on loyalty to a certain geographical place? And in that sense, if you look at refugees, in order to be accepted and being loyal in a place, they are almost asked to deny their previous culture, right? You are integrated the moment that you forget that you are a Muslim. You are accepted and integrated the moment you stop, you stop reading Arabic books in the flight. I sometimes enjoy taking my Arabic books in the flight, and whoever is sitting nearby me is freaking out because he's thinking, oh my God, I mean, she has an Arabic book. What is it? And in that sense, I think, that when I was writing all these billows, my daughters come, the first day they come back home and they get inside the house and they say, how can we invite now our friends home? And in that sense, how can you use aesthetic? And again, I mean, I believe that if art has any role today, it has the role of understanding how can we not be confined, if it is a struggle for freedom, right? And a lot of time I feel that art itself is asking loyalty to many artists. No, you are loyal from the moment that you accept certain things. You accept the market, you accept this, you accept that. In which way it's possible to be accepted as a temporary person? I don't think that neither art or architecture or any other place, any other discipline answer to this. Maybe art gives you a bit more freedom, yes, but yet still asking you loyalty, right? And in that sense, I am asking, is it possible to be demanding, to be a temporary person outside of disciplines, outside of nation states, and yet having rights?
Oui, quand je reprends l'anecdote, l'expérience dans le train là, que je racontais, ce qui était fascinant, c'est qu'une des techniques de résistance en fait, au contrôle de police dans les trains, c'est pour les personnes qui, de l'Italie, tentaient de rejoindre la France, puis ensuite l'Angleterre. Il y avait des stratégies de passing qui étaient très intéressantes, et donc l'idée c'était de passer pour un Africain-Américain, donc d'avoir une casquette de baseball ou un vêtement qui en fait marquait le corps noir comme Africain-Américain et pas comme migrant illégal. Et donc en fait c'était tout aussi ce jeu de l'identification et du marquage en fait des corps qui aussi induit des formes de résistance et des techniques de résistance qui passent forcément par le fait de déjouer en fait la façon dont ce jeu entre des signes en fait, c'est presque une sémiologie, c'est-à-dire que c'est la question de l'identité politique, c'est aussi toute cette sémiologie du pouvoir en fait qui vient identifier par des marqueurs et qui fait de certains des corps voilà, qui vont être sujets à une identification soupçonneuse quand d'autres passent précisément. Et donc ça c'était très marquant. Et puis une autre chose en fait, évidemment, on en parlait tout à l'heure, il y a beaucoup de pensées convergentes depuis 30 ans, 40 ans sur cette critique évidemment et puis de reprendre y compris avec des héritages comme Arendt et qui reprennent cette question de Agamben. Mais chez Butler ou chez Achille Mbembe, la critique de l'identité comme identification politique et comme une des modalités de brutalisation des vies, elle est majeure. Mais ce qui me semble vraiment à penser, c'est la façon, c'est à la fois les technologies de répression que ça engage, de forclusion des territoires, des espaces, des individus, des groupes, etc. Mais c'est la façon, évidemment, dont ça produit des cadres dans lesquels nous n'avons pas d'autre choix pour nous penser et pour vivre et pour élaborer, y compris la façon dont je conçois ce qui est de l'ordre de mon devoir ou mon droit politique, par exemple, mais aussi mon devoir éthique envers autrui. Et la façon dont je me pense comme citoyen national, comme la condition de possibilité qui va me permettre justement d'accueillir, d'être en solidarité est quelque chose même qui est incroyable. C'est-à-dire qu'on ne peut pas penser, y compris la solidarité, sans se penser comme un citoyen qui a des privilèges, qui est identifié comme ayant des droits et qui peut, du coup, effectivement, accueillir, protéger, etc. Donc, en fait, y compris la façon dont on se pense comme un citoyen avec un droit de circuler dans le strict cadre intelligible du passeport national. Donc, c'est aussi cette idée que c'est une façon de déconstruire, évidemment, les modalités et les technologies de pouvoir, d'identification, de réduction des individus à des formes d'identité foreclose, et aussi, du coup, d'essayer de comprendre pourquoi un certain nombre de tactiques de résistance passent forcément par le fait de déjouer, en fait, ces identifications. Mais plus fondamentalement encore, c'est la façon dont nous-mêmes nous réfléchissons dans l'intimité de nos subjectivités, comme ne pouvant nous dire que dans le langage de l'identification et de l'identité. Et la façon dont nous pouvons penser nos ressources politiques, notre agency, que dans ce cadre-là. Et là, je pense qu'il y a aussi quelque chose à complètement déconstruire.
I think we could discuss longer, and I don't know if you have, if in the audience you have any questions, but someone was telling me that it might be good that we continue this convivial antagonism through a cup of coffee or maybe water, and that maybe we can come back later if you want, in 10-15 minutes, for the last series of questions, if you want, with all the participants, if they want to come. And probably you already know that the writer Leonora Miano will not be able to be here with us today because of the strike. And we decided to do a little reading of her work, to which we invite you to participate if you want at the end of this convivial antagonism moment that we will have now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we can take a break. Et après, on revient pour le dernier panel. Et après, on peut se retrouver.